the title of your book, right, is how the elites ate the social justice movement, and you spend time in the book talking about this idea of like elite capture, that various movements for justice end up being captured by elite interests. And I want to just, not to sort of try to settle it, once and for all or anything, but just to kind of give you a chance to sound off on it, kind of float I think the critique of that framework, of the idea that like the problem is that you have sort of perfectly good movements that get captured by elite interests that, as I understand it, would be made by people like Adolphe Venturi Reed, who would say, no, it's not that you have sort of the good version of identity politics that ends up, getting captured by elites. That it's that you have a lot, like you just have different, like fundamentally different ideological goals that in other words, like if we were talking about racism, the different things that could mean earlier, and okay, if racism means prejudices that people have, prejudices that they may act on, then okay, fair enough, that's bad. But if you're talking about structural facts about American society, and you then you think, okay, well, there is sort of what identity-based justice movements often see as the thing that they're being anti when they're anti-racism is really often defined in terms of disparities, and that you might think that's just a fundamentally different goal than the goal that you get from a sort of material left politics. In other words, it's not, if you think that the sort of fundamentally unjust thing is disparity, then that would suggest that justice would mean that you have the right percentage of each group of people at each level of the hierarchy, that there's, the right percentage of black people and white people are, in poverty, or conversely sitting on corporate boards or whatever. And that, that's just sort of, if you have that, if you have that sort of identity-based framework, that's the sort of natural goal of it. So I don't know if I'm doing, full justice to the critique right now, but I think it would be something like that, that's just that sort of identitarian goal is just a very different goal than the goal of sort of materially based left politics, that it's like we don't think that sort of, the problem isn't that people, living in neighborhoods with bad schools and lots of crime and lots of militarized policing are disproportionately black. The problem is that anybody, lives in those neighborhoods. So I just kind of wanted to give you a chance to kind of respond or interact with that idea.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, yes, there are different material interests of people who are in this sort of managerial positions and use those managerial positions to sort of direct the sort of America's broad sort of social justice movement. Okay. I think that the chapter in the book that is most important to me is the chapter on nonprofits, which occupy a weird space within American politics. They are extremely influential. I really take them to task in the book, because I think that nonprofits, among other things, sort of suck up a lot of sort of radical energy and sort of disperse it into sort of bureaucratized processes, and that because they are sort of perpetuating self-defensive institutions, that's sort of inevitable. And I've had to interact with them a lot. I think Answer had a nonprofit at one point in the Iraq War buildup. But look, it certainly, you can say, look, these people are just opposed to each other, and there's no way we're going to sort of get them to sort of on board with us. I think that number one, I don't know what we would do without them, right? So I one misconception I've sort of picked up on from people who have read the book is, it's my position is that the sort of like the Black Lives Matter activists, particularly, just to pick an example, I didn't want them to be anything other than what they were, and I didn't want them to do anything else than what they did, which is to sort of express their values and fight for what they felt was the most moral and strategic best interest of sort of ending racism and ending police violence. They're activists, and that's their job. What I think is pathological is that it's not that they pursued what they wanted, right? But that the broader conversation, right, did not reflect the fact that the average BLM activist is just totally different from the average Black Democrat, right? They're just very different sort of people who are emerging from different contexts. I think the average Black Democrat is something like in their late 40s or early 50s. They have some college education but didn't get a degree. They make between like $45,000 and $55,000 a year, and they are a traditionalist in a certain sense, which leads to a degree of social conservatism that our media doesn't like to talk about because it likes to sort of portray all Black people as radicals, right? The problem is not that the activists are not the same as the median Black Democrat. The problem is that our national conversation, our media, and academia did not reflect on the fact and could not bring itself to say, hey, these BLM activists have a lot to say and we should listen to them, but also they're speaking for a very narrow slice of the Black population, right? That like the average Black BLM activist is someone who is dramatically more educated than the average Black American, someone who is at least more upwardly mobile, if not necessarily more wealthy than the average Black American, and someone whose politics are well to the left of the average Black American. And it's funny that I even have to say that, right? Like in any other context, you wouldn't have to say the activist class is more radical than the median Democrat. But what happened within the sort of 2020 moment is too many people in the media, out of a sort of sense of ideological convenience, just sort of decided to represent BLM activists as sort of like the voice of Black America. I think that, yes, there is a natural tendency for this managerial class, right? These managerial elites who are now deeply culturally liberal, but who have a sort of tenuous sort of connection or dedication to economically left politics. We're never going to sort of chase them out of the temple, right? They're always going to be in the Democratic Party, in the nonprofits that throw money around, what people in Congress call the groups, right? They're always going to be present in the local organizing groups and activist groups, etc. It's all about, can we kind of bend them to the best degree that we can, prevent them from bending us too much, and find the places of sort of our interests sort of being mutually sort of colliding in a way that is productive. I mean, I would look at the child tax credit, right? It's astounding that the demise of the child tax credit after 1 year got as little press as it did, right? Affirmative action, for example. I'm a believer in race-based affirmative action in principle. In practice, it tends to be kind of a charade because the universities that implement these policies are self-interested bodies. But anyway,
a point like Bertram Cooper wrote this article for The Atlantic. He pointed out that that Harvard had, up until before the Supreme Court decision overturning race-based affirmative action, Harvard had achieved parity on paper, demographic representation on paper. In other words, the percentage of Black students in their incoming classes was the same as the percentage of Black students in the American population, but a ridiculous proportion of those were like the sons and daughters of Nigerian oil executives,
Right.
Diplomats, etc. That because of course Harvard doesn't, I mean, like Harvard wants people whose families they can have ongoing financial relationships with to go to Harvard. And even now, I mean, the way that it would be most efficient, I mean, if you just wanted if you just if you wanted to tackle the underlying problem with the disparity the between black people and white people going to college in the United States. I mean, the problem is not really that the children of the black middle class are going to college at a lower rate than the children of the white middle class. The problem is that it's a smaller black middle class. And so you could even just have affirmative action pegged to parents' income levels. But I think elite colleges, I suspect that's like the last thing they would want to do.
Right. And I mean, look, I mean, here's like the punchline.
Yeah.
These are very sort of back of the envelope sort of things, but
sure.
If you look at like the size of the population, so like in nonprofit world, sometimes they talk about like the addressable population of a program, right? Like if we got everyone who's eligible for this program into the program, how many people would that be? The addressable population of race-based affirmative action is actually like really small. Like just like it is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, right? As I point out all the time, the vast majority of American college students never even apply to what would be considered a competitive college, an elite college, right? Then you compare that to the child tax credit, right? The child tax credit, some people did the analysis and suggested that it could have cut black poverty by a third. And you'll notice I didn't say black childhood poverty by a third. There's a chance
overall black poverty. Yeah,
overall black poverty. The immense focus on affirmative action and the almost total silence on the child tax credit, right, is a perfect example of the problem of elite capture of these conversations, right? Because if you are the kind of person who writes for the New York Times, right, or if you are somebody who is a bigwig at a major university who can sort of get the message out, if you're somebody at the Ford Foundation, right, which interfaces a lot with sort of college and college funding and something like that, you are someone who is almost certainly, right, educated in an elite school yourself, and very far from the world of who needs the child tax credit. And so without having any evil intent at all, you shift the focus from what affects a tiny slice of black adolescents. And they are the most upwardly mobile black adolescents who probably need the least help, and away from this sort of a program. We can't just completely undo that tendency. But what I think people can do if they care and they give a shit is to start to sort of pull back and say, okay, hold on. What is the issue that is just symbolically loaded as an affirmative action at elite schools? And what is the issue that actually has the chance of having the most impact? And I think that if you could really, really push the racial justice angle of the child tax credit to the sort of, professional managerial liberal elite, you could get their support for it. And along the way, you would also be helping a lot of poor white and Hispanic and Asian kids too.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know how optimistic I am about getting the support of sort of pro-diversity elite technocrats for that. Although, whatever, your lips to God's ear. That's so, I mean, yeah, we could keep going for a long time. I do want to be respectful of your time here and wrap it up. But I mean, I also wonder if something that's parallel to that point. I mean, even on the actual left, like, okay, it's not as bad as focusing conversations on social injustice on which of the teensy tiny number of rich kids go to Harvard. Are which ones those are, right? Like that's sort of extra absurd. But even on, the actual left, socialist left, there's still, I do sometimes wonder about like the amount of emphasis that's put on college. Like I am, obviously 100% in favor of tuition-free higher education. I've written a bunch about it and student debt forgiveness and all of that. Yes, yes, yes. I'm for all of that. But I do wonder about the fact that like how much more emphasis we seem to put on free college as opposed to like free daycare, given that an awful lot more people, have kids than go to college.
Yeah. I mean, look, it is the story that people want to tell, right, is one of self-advancement, even if it's people who are progressive, right? So people are addicted to the notion of, okay, well, if we give somebody money for daycare, well, then that's a handout, right? Mm-hmm. But if we give them money for college, then they can advance themselves and they can become wealthy, and there'll be this new black upper class, etc. My first book was all about
the Cult of Smart,
the Cult of Smart is just all about like the broken logic of pushing more and more people into college, right? Well, you should read the book, everybody, but in the most bare terms, a college degree has had value, and we know this empirically, by the way, not just sort of rationally. A college degree has value because it is rare, right?
Exactly.
And if you force everyone into college, it will no longer be rare. And so one of the things that you can see from pushing more and more people into the college pipeline is you see the absurd rise in master's degrees. I encourage you all to go look for a chart of the rise of proportion of people with master's degrees, because once too many people have the old credential of the bachelor's degree, they need to go find a new credential. This is tied, for example, to the obsession with representation in movies and TV shows, where look, I obviously want black actors and actresses to have as much opportunity as everyone else. And I think that it's really important to tell those stories. And I think just like a diverse Hollywood is just a net good in and of itself. But the story that is often told is the story of, well, this will, black kids will see these people on these shows and they'll know that they can do anything. And then they'll rise up and become actors too, right? Which is like,
how many? What percentage of the population is going to do that?
Right. Yeah. How many of them exactly? Right. But that is fundamentally like a very like sort of neoliberal and very kind of classically American story of like a person rising themselves up. And I'm a lefty, and I think that it shouldn't matter whether somebody can become a great actor or not. Even though I want them to have the opportunity to. Right. We should be raising the floor for everybody with a more materially redistributive society.
Yeah. Well, that is a really good note to end the discussion on. So the book, Jake, if we have the graphic once again, is How Elites Ate the Social Justice Movement. That comes out officially on September 5th, but you can pre-order it from everywhere.
Yep. If you just put it into the search bar, the Simon & Schuster page, Simon & Schuster page has, a link to Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but also links to independent bookshops that you can buy it from if you are of the anti-Amazon sort.
Fair enough. Well, everybody should do that. Everybody should buy the book. I got to read an advanced PDF, but I'm still going to get a paper book when it comes out. So, thank you. Thank you, Freddie. Really great stuff as always.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben. I appreciate it.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgess. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.